Good afternoon and welcome back here to Villanova Sports Talk here on WXVU. David Szczepanski with you. And I'm honored to be joined by Villanova football head coach Mark Ferrante. Coach Ferrante, as always, pleasure to have you here in the studio. And how you doing today?
Oh, we're doing great, Dave, and I appreciate you asking me to be on. So we're excited to come up and talk a little Villanova football with you and anybody out there that's listening. And before we get started, I just want to thank everyone, Nova Nation, V United, everybody that had the opportunity to follow us, support us, and to you as well for coming along on some trips and being there for home games and doing what you did for us and giving us the recognition and covering us as much as you did. So thank you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. An honor and a really good season at the end of it. 10-4 the Wildcats. Getting to the second round of the playoffs again. Of course, losing to Incarnate Word, but a really tough battle there in Texas against a high-powered offense. How do you feel about the way the team performed this season, going 10-4?
Excited about a 10-win season. You know, it's not easy to do to get double-digit wins. So I think only 14 teams in the country in our FCS out of 129 were able to have 10 or more wins this season. So that's awesome. And then to make the playoffs 2 years in a row is always a good thing. It's just that, you know, you hate to see it end the way it did. So, but really good season with our guys this year. We felt we had really good leadership. We had a good maturity, especially on defense. I've talked about that all year. That's where a lot of our experience and all those things were. But, excited for what's next, what lies ahead. I had all the one-on-one meetings at the end of every year. I meet with every player independently, and they meet with their coach and, people on their side of the ball. And, it's good. It's refreshing. It gives you a lot of optimism moving forward when you have an opportunity to sit down and talk with every member of the team one-on-one and what their goals are and what they recollect and what they felt this season meant to them, and then obviously what they look forward to moving forward. So, it's been good. It was a great year, and we're excited for it. Obviously, we'd love to still be playing. There's 4 teams left. We'd like to be one of them 4 and ultimately one of the 2, and someday maybe just the one that wins the whole thing, like we did in 2009. But, good year. Looking to have a better and a great year next year.
Yeah, and excited. I'm sure you're already getting ready for August and getting ready for Ocean City, and obviously looking forward to that. And Coach, I really liked what you said, because I remember we had you on here a few months ago, and you talked about how, some of the big state schools, talked about South Dakota State last year. They have so many players, 300 players around there, Villanova around 100, as you said, and I'm sure that helps in having those one-on-one, conversations. So that's definitely big there. I want to start with the defense specifically here. You brought it up, and I know a lot of the press conferences said, the defense was really how you guys won a lot of games, really kept you in a lot of games where the offense was struggling. One of the best defenses in the CAA and FCS this season, allowing around 18 points per game. What do you think was the biggest reason for the defensive success this year?
I think the fact that we stayed relatively healthy. I mean, we got banged up and beat up a little bit, but, from a season-ending injury perspective, we stayed relatively healthy throughout the whole team, but primarily on defense. You rotate more guys through on defense than you do in other positions, so it keeps them a little more fresh as well. They did a good job, like you just said, keeping people out of the end zone, keeping our games close. So, they maybe weren't on the field for as many plays to help keep them refreshed and so on and so forth. And then the level of experience we had a lot of guys that have played a lot of football here for us at Villanova. When you look at the couple 6th-year guys we had over there with Goodman and Waxter, and then you look at the 5th-year guys with the other safeties, Potter, Tran, and all the linebackers. Hartzell's the only one. I think I mentioned this to you before, David. If you take Hartzell and Capri Martin off of the starting 11 on defense, everyone else was a college graduate. So they've been around a long time. They played together a long time, obviously developed, and each year got better. And this was the cumulative effect of those guys being together for so long and then just becoming really good players because of the level of experience they have. I think Jalen Goodman may have broke a Villanova record as far as number of games played and started in. I think he's like 56 games.
Wow, that's really cool. And I mean, the defense, as we talked about, here all the time in your post-game press conferences, is really, the glue that really kept the team going at a lot of times. Specifically, want to talk about, Brendan Bell, Shane Hartzell, who you mentioned. They combined for almost 250 total tackles this season. What did Bell and Hartzell, bring to the locker room this season, but also, especially to this defense?
Right. So when you look at our defense and how it's structured, the linebackers are the ones that hopefully will make the bulk of the tackles. You have three really unselfish guys in front of them, as opposed to a 4-down lineman. Defense, we play a 3-down lineman primarily. So those three guys try to occupy all 5 offensive linemen to help the linebackers stay unblocked and keep them free. And then those 2 guys, as far as again, their level of experience, the amount of film they've watched, the amount of games they've played in, they just understand, sometimes before the ball snapped, just by the formation a team might come out in, they might know just by how they're aligned if it's run or pass. So if you know that before the ball is snapped, that helps. And then if you really watch enough film, you might be able to say, okay, it's either this play or that play. And so the anticipation that they have from their study, from their practice, from their experience really helps them be the linebackers they were this year. And as far as what they bring, Shane's more quiet. Bell's a little more, talkative. Bell was elected captain. Shane very well could be captain next year, but they are really good leaders. Like I said, Bell will be more vocal to his teammates, offense and defense, at times a little more sarcastic, but that's just Bell. You kind of know what he brings to the table, and he's a high-energy guy, but they both have really good practice habits. Shane, the quieter version of that, but they have really good practice habits. They have really good, they do a lot of extra stuff on their own, as I mentioned, the film watching, the study on their own, trying to see if there's a tell by an offensive lineman to see if it's run or pass, or again, just through the formational study and those type of things and the down and distance study. So they just have done a great job developing themselves, and they'll also say they were studied under Forrest Ryan, an All-American linebacker who was fortunate enough to be on our staff this year. So Forrest, they played understudy to him, if you will, while Forrest was playing here. Forrest became an All-American, and he had 152 tackles, I believe it was, his senior year. These guys are close to that with 120 plus. But they'll credit Forrest and his way he brought them up through the system when they were younger. Now they're in his shoes, and now they're doing the same thing to the younger guys behind them. So they bring a lot to the locker room, obviously to the field, and they've done a lot for our program.
Yeah, and it felt like, calling the games when you were, calling who was making a tackle. It was either Bell or Hartzell, 80% of the time. But specifically, you talked about Brendan Bell and how, he's played a vocal role, not just on the defense, but on the offense. I mean, was the first player in Villanova program history to score an offensive and a defensive touchdown in the same game. What were your thoughts when he was getting in the game there and Coach Bowden called his number to get a rushing touchdown, not just once, twice this season?
Right, yeah, I've mentioned this a number of times. We actually tried to get him a passing reception touchdown as well in one of the games.
That would have been fun.
It's just that he was covered. And he'll tell you he could throw it, so it would have been cool to have him throw a touchdown. But I've said this multiple times, and the scouts have been in looking at Waxter and Watkins primarily, but also Bell has surfaced on film, as you have just discussed. He's probably the best athlete on our team. If you look at someone who can just do everything well, he played multiple positions in multiple sports in high school. He played some quarterback in high school, played running back in high school, obviously played some defense in high school. So, and he's been bugging us for a couple seasons. I want to play both ways. He wants to do all those things. And this year, partially due to injury, we didn't have as many tight ends that were healthy long enough to get into some of those goal line packages where you saw Bell. And then mainly because of who he is as an athlete and how smart he is in the sport and what he can do and what he can manage and what he can handle. Some guys might not be able to handle it mentally and schematically, but he can pick it all up. So, so we put him in there, and to see him, we knew he was probably going to get an offensive touchdown at some point, but for him to have it in a game where he also had a pick six and had an interception and scored, that was pretty special. So that was good to see. Very
cool. And, specifically, last question here for the defense. But, Coach, in the game against the Incarnate Word, you were without Isis Waxter, who suffered an injury. But you really got to see a lot of the younger guys step up, right? Newton Asim, as well as Zamir Dawood, who had a big interception early on in the season, I believe, against Youngstown State. What did you see out of those younger guys defensively, and how excited are you to see them, hopefully next year here for Villanova?
Well, that's what I meant by after these one-on-one meetings and feeling refreshed and excited and enthused about what it's going to look like down the road. Let's start with Zamir. he played a lot for us as a sophomore this year, played some last year as well, and he's a really good corner. So when you lose a guy like Ice Waxter, and then Mims was the other guy who's a fifth-year guy, they have a lot of experience within the program. And then he went down in warm-ups in Incarnate Word game, and he tried to play and then got re-aggravated his hip in the game, so he was out early in the game. So like you said, you got Zamir, who's out there now, not rotationally but full-time, and then you throw freshman Newton Essium in there. And one thing that they showed us, Zamir throughout the year, Newton definitely primarily in that game, but he's been on the field a little bit as well earlier in the season. But that game for sure, because he had to play the bulk of it, showed that they don't lack confidence. They definitely have a skill set. They need to work on some technique things and obviously get bigger, faster, stronger, because they're still younger guys, and all the things that will happen in the offseason through the weight room and, the training. But they showed that they're not intimidated. They showed that they can go out there and compete at this level, and to do it against a team like Incarnate Word, who, as you said, is a pretty high explosive offense, and they have a couple really good receivers with a quarterback who started at Texas A&M at one point. They weren't intimidated by going in a playoff game and playing, and they played pretty well. I mean, I said this before. I believe I said it in the post-game press conference. Going into that game, as we're watching their film and seeing how explosive their offense was and a lot of things they did throughout the course of their season, if you would have told me that we were going to hold them to 13 points, I would have thought for sure we'd come out on top. But unfortunately, we didn't score enough on our end, and we had the opportunities. But our defense played really well that game, minus the offsides that we had. We had some defensive offsides that allowed them to keep a couple drives going instead of getting off the field. But other than that, our defense they had 90-plus plays, over 400 yards of offense, and only 13 points to show for it. If you looked at the statistics of what they did through the four quarters, you would think they would have more like 33 points, not 13. So credit to our defense, keep them out of the end zone.
And I remember that game, we had unfortunately I wasn't able to be in Texas for that game, but we were at the Wells Fargo Center, and before Villanova basketball tipped off, we were watching it. And you just look at the stats, as you said, Coach. I mean, over 400 total yards of offense. Zach Calzada, one of the best quarterbacks in the FCS. And Villanova's defense, showed throughout the whole season how good they are. And, of course, I'm sure you have to love the mindset of those younger guys heading into next season, not afraid to play against anybody.
Yeah, no, that was good. And DeMille Bostic's another guy who played a little bit for us throughout the year, but we're still able to get him a redshirt year, I believe. So just sitting with them this week, I had meetings with them yesterday or the day before, Monday, and they're ready to compete. They're ready to go. They got a little taste of being on the field as freshmen. Some of them played a little bit, but were still able to save the 4 or less games, so they're able to redshirt, so they didn't burn the year. But just talking to some of the younger guys, the ones we're talking about specifically, they're excited for spring practice. They're excited to go home for the holidays, because some of these guys haven't been home since June, because we're here the whole time and we don't get the fall break, and we didn't get the Thanksgiving break, thankfully, because we're in the playoffs. So some of these guys haven't been home for going on 6 months. So they're anxious to do that, but they're also really excited and looking forward to coming back, getting started with the film work, getting started with the training, and then getting into spring practice. Yeah,
now transitioning over to the offense. By the way, everybody, here on Villanova Sports Talk, here with Villanova football head coach Mark Ferrante. Coach, the offense really never found a consistent balance this season, with the passing attack and the rushing attack, around 22 points per game. I know Connor had an injury in the middle of the season that was bothering him for a little bit. What do you think was the biggest reason for the inconsistency, especially in the passing game?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, when you look at what we did a year ago, obviously we're more productive on the offensive side. Connor was still the quarterback. A lot of the linemen were some of the same linemen. However, we did graduate a couple of the linemen, and then 5 of the 6 main skill players were gone. So there's guys like, D. Will Barley and T.D. Aoderjai and Jalen Jackson, the 3 running backs that we had. Jalen's been here since 2018, I believe it was, because he was a 6th-year guy, and then the other 2 were with Connor in his class in 2019. So they all played together, and then you got Hayek and Pringle at the wide receiver along with Sanchez. Sanchez was the only returner from the season before. So 85-90% of our offensive production graduated. So Connor's back, throwing the new people, everyone was questioning what's the running back room going to look like. And obviously the young guys there stepped up and did pretty well. I mean, Ragland in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season was the CA Rookie of the Week twice, and then David Abbott was the CA Rookie of the Week 2 other times after Ragland went down, and David ended up replacing him. And so now you had those 2 guys competing for time and playing a lot of football for us along with Jabril Mace. So the running back room seemed to be answered sooner. All right, but now we got redshirt freshman, true freshman, redshirt freshman playing offensive line. Once Temmie got hurt, you got Jake Picard and Steph Voltaire as the only upperclassmen that really have a lot of experience playing with the offensive system the year before. So even though you had your top quarterback back, you had a lot of inexperience around him. So there were games where we were doing fine as far as the balance. We want to be run and pass. We want to be able to do both. And when Connor is able to also add into the running game with some quarterback run or some of his scrambling ability, that makes it even that much more challenging for the defense. But as you mentioned, the Stony Brook game, he rolled an ankle. I'm shocked he even went back into that game, but that goes to show you the toughness that he has. And I'm surprised he didn't miss the next week, again, to the toughness and preparation and things that he brings to the table. So once we lost him while he's coming over that injury, we weren't really looking to do any quarterback runs in the system. And then he wasn't really looking to scramble the way he would be capable of doing if he were healthy. So that's that middle of the season where it's like, okay, we're kind of getting by the skin of our teeth, thankfully to our defense. Special teams playing pretty good, but the offensive explosions that we had a year ago just aren't coming. We're not hitting those big explosive plays. If you recall, the year before, Sanchez led the country in yards per reception. He didn't have the most receptions because we don't throw it like some other teams, but as far as yards per completion and per reception, he had big explosive plays all over the place. And we just never got back to that this year. We never got the true rhythm that we were able to have with the year before with the guys that have been playing together for 5 years, from the skill positions, Connor's timing with the wideouts, and obviously in the running back room.
And talking about, the wide receivers, talk about Jalen Sanchez a little bit. Sanchez declared a few days ago he was heading to the transfer portal. Devin Smith, transfer from North Carolina Central, led the team in touchdown receptions, out of eligibility. Kopecki, most likely also out of eligibility. What did you like, though, out of those guys this season? I know the passing game wasn't as efficient as we talked about as maybe it hoped to be in the beginning of the season, but, what did you make out of their performances?
Well, they all did pretty well. I mean, Kopecki was a great surprise. He played lacrosse here, as everyone knows, for 4 years, didn't play football since his high school career. So, for him to come out and join us this year for the first time, he showed that he's a good athlete. He showed he has really good hands. He's a really competitive person, but it just took him a while. He was doing better later in the year because he was still learning. He was still learning to line up properly and run the correct route and run it the right way and those types of things. So we're trying to do a waiver to see if we can get him back, because he only played 4 years of lacrosse, and then his 5th year was football, but only 1 year of football. So I don't know if there's a reason for them to grant him an extra year of football eligibility, but we're going to try to put it in there and see if we can get him. Sanchez, he was so explosive the year before because we had Hayek, Pringle, and Sanchez. So Sanchez was more of the unknown the year before when he led the country in explosive plays, because everyone was worried about Pringle and Hayek a little more, so they were getting more of the bracketed coverage or the double coverage, and that was freeing Sanchez up to go beat his guy one-on-one and make those plays, and he did, and he was fortunate to do that. So now this year, he comes in the season, he's the known guy, right? People know Dev Smith, but not really within our league, and they have no idea who Kopecki is, right? So Sanchez was getting a lot of coverage, a lot of guys that were paying attention to him, a lot of guys that were getting bracketed on him and so on. So we're trying to free him up and do some things. So we'll see what happens there. And he did go in the portal, but I'm still trying to recruit him out of it. So that's kind of how we're handling that right now. And then Dev did a nice job. I'd love to have Dev for another year because, again, coming into a system and not being here in the spring makes it harder. If you can get a mid-year guy and he can get a spring practice under his belt and then go through the summer, and then him and the quarterback can, get some 7-on-7s going in the summer and just throw the ball on air just for timing and those type of things, that would help tremendously, which they did some of that last summer. And then, you get into preseason, you're just further along on the mental curve as far as what you're trying to do. So Dev was a really good guy to have in the room. He studied hard. I watched him in meetings. He's a big note taker, whether it be wide receiver room or special teams room. And he was really a good person to have on our team and a good player. And, we just, again, never got into that big-time rhythm for him to have that super year. Him and none of them had that super explosive year that Sanchez had the year before and Dev might have had. He was the leading receiver at NC Central his senior year, and he ended up coming and doing a good job with us. But, we would have liked to have had better numbers. Just didn't go that way due to, again, some of the inexperience involved with the whole offense.
Yeah, such fantastic insight there, Coach. With Coach Ferrante here at Villanova Football, here on Villanova Sports Talk, I want to talk about the most efficient part of your offense, the rushing attack. David Abbott led the way with almost 1,000 rushing yards this season, 9 touchdowns. Was named CAA Offensive Rookie of the Year. Also entered the transfer portal a few days ago. How much did David impress you this season? And as he, looks for other programs, what is kind of the insight on him and what he brought to your team and locker room?
Okay, so the first insight on him that's probably the most important piece of that puzzle and those questions is he withdrew from the transfer portal. So he's still here. So David is staying with us, which is exciting. He gave me that news yesterday. So had an opportunity to talk with him and his family a few times. He was in my office a lot, try to help these guys sort through what is happening out there. And so thankfully David's staying. As far as what he was able to do on the field, that was remarkable because we never anticipate in any position really that a true freshman will come into our program, and not that they won't play, because we're going to play freshmen. We don't have a super deep roster, as you alluded to early in this conversation, where we only have 93 players on our roster versus the 120 plus that some of these other programs have. So our freshmen will have opportunities to play primarily through special teams and things of that nature. But once Rags went down and David was able to plug in there and show us what he could do, he really did a great job. He was able to pick up, the schemes and pick up the assignments. We all have work to do, right? He knows he can get better. He knows he's got to understand the pass protection a little better in the pass game, running routes from, running back position and so on. But as far as when you put the ball in his hands, he's a big guy. He's an explosive guy. He's a really good player. So for him to have 900 plus yards and the number of touchdowns he's had and, to be selected as a CA Rookie of the Year, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. That doesn't happen every year where you have that type of player. I think the last CA Rookie of the Year we had was Benford, I believe, he won it. So David's a really good player. He's got great size, got great vision. He knows he wants to work on his speed to maybe have some more explosive runs like he did in the Stony Brook game. I think he had one for 50 plus and 70 plus. So, those are things he wants to continue to add to his resume and do a good job from that perspective. But for David to come in and pick the system up as quickly as he did and then go out there and be able to perform at the level he did was exceptional in our minds. So that's why we're really tried to get him to stay, and thankfully after yesterday's conversation and conversations with him and his family, he's chosen to stay.
And I remember, Coach, we were sitting here at the beginning of the season, and, the big question was around the running back room and how that was going to perform when you lose, 3 really great running backs, as I mentioned earlier. And David Abbott really helped that conversation. But as too did Isaiah Ragland in the beginning of the season. Ragland did struggle a little bit at the end of the season, wasn't getting the number of carries so that he was getting in the beginning of the season. What will be his role heading into next season?
Well, those two are going to go head-to-head for who's going to be the starter. But really, in our system, it really doesn't matter who's the starter, because sometimes the starter might be on the field for the first play, and the next guy might be in on the second play, depending on how many, what we're trying to call, what we're running, what the system calls for. So those two guys, and Jabril Mace is another one, along with everyone else in the room. Eli Smith will be back. He did a good job this year because he was banged up the year before, and he's a year ahead of all those guys. So you got Eli as a junior, you got Rags and Jabril as redshirt freshmen, sophomores in the classroom, and you got Isaiah Wright, Julian Glantz, they're also juniors, and then you got David, as we just talked about, the one true freshman in the room. So they're all back. So there's a lot of competition in the room for the spring. But Rags was the starter while David was looking to be the backup along with Jabril. Those are kind of the 3 guys that we're rotating through the most. Now Eli's healthy, and the other 2 guys are going to be more experienced, so now there's going to be a lot more competition in the spring. But Rags had that high ankle sprain, and, it's different relative to the position you play. If you're an offensive lineman, well, you don't need to cut on your foot, and you don't need to make those pivots and things. You can tape that thing up and almost make it look like a cast and still be able to play the offensive line. But when you're a quarterback or a wideout or a running back that has to, be able to go sideways and make those 90-degree cuts and then accelerate, you have a high ankle sprain, it's going to last longer. And Rags never really got through 100% healthy once that happened. He had the high ankle sprain, had a really good season going early on, as we talked about, and then had the high ankle sprain, missed a game or two, and then if you don't give that thing 3 to 4 weeks of really recover and resting, then it's never going to get back to 100% until you get to the offseason. So later in the year, you're watching him and he's playing, but he didn't look the same as he did in the first few games when he was Rookie of the Week. So now this offseason will be big for Rags. He's probably one of the hardest workers we have on the team as far as doing the extra stuff. He's in there watching film every day. He's in the training room. He's in the weight room every day. He's always working on his flexibility. So he works really hard. So there's going to be great competition in that room for next year.
Going to be a lot of fun to watch that rushing attack, especially with Avid coming back. Second to last football question here for you, Coach. Obviously with Watkins leaving, that leaves some questions in the quarterback room. What can you tell us about the quarterback situation heading into next season? I know it's still pretty early, but Sure. What are your early thoughts?
Yeah, well, the guys we have in the room right now, Tanner Maddox is the heir apparent, if you will, because he's been in the room for 3 years. So kind of like what Connor was, he's been the understudy for 3 years. He's a junior in the classroom. He's been in the room with Coach Bowden, Connor, and all the guys. So he knows the system the best because he's been here the longest. He just hasn't had the in-game reps that, you would hope maybe your apparent starter would have. But Tanner is a really good teammate. He's really smart. Players really like him. He seems to be a really good leader just in his own way. And, he's not as big as Connor, but he's athletic and he can throw the ball and he can do a lot of good things. So we'll see what Tanner brings to the table in the spring. And then behind him, you got Rob Russo. Rob's a guy. You got Dylan Mills, a true freshman from California who actually went to the same high school as Chris Bowden when he was a quarterback out there at San Clemente. You got J.R. Ryder. So we got some guys in the room. You got Mike Benincasa. So we have competition in the position. Now it's, okay, who's going to take the spot? Who's going to own the spot, and then who's going to compete for the next spot behind him. So, and then we may or may not look for a guy in the portal. We may bring in a grad transfer just to add a little more competition into the room, but we do like all guys that we have in the room right now. They're just limited with experience. Tanner is the one we know the most about because he's been with us the longest. The other guys have been throwing the ball down there around on scout team and have shown some good things, but, that's not being in control of the offense. That's looking at the play off of a card and, okay, throw it to this guy or hand it to that guy. So now they got to get in the film room, get in the study room, get with Coach Bowden, and learn the system the way you would hope your starting quarterback would know how to run the system.
Should be a fun offseason, and again, I'm sure the next time, Coach, we'll probably have a little bit more of an update at, when we talk at the Be The Match when we do the broadcast for Be The Match in the spring. Coach, the 2025 schedule, last question, is officially out today. Knew that you guys were going to head up to Happy Valley, play Penn State for a little bit. Obviously, no Delaware on the schedule for the first time in a while. But how do you feel heading into next season, and what is kind of the offseason focus for Villanova?
Okay, so the offseason focus is let's get better today. That's always going to be my approach. We got to attack January when we get back the right way. They got to get with Coach Tucker and his staff in the strength and conditioning room and hit the weight room and take care of their bodies and do all those things. As far as the schedule, it is what it is, right? It's the hand you're dealt, so you're going to play the people that are on your schedule. I don't look too far in advance at any of that stuff. We do know we have Penn State this year heading back up to Happy Valley. That was some of those contract that was signed a while ago. We played them in, 21, I believe it was, and now this is the second go-round we get to go up there. So that's exciting. Our guys love that because a lot of our guys, think they can play at that level. So now they get the opportunity to do so and put something on tape and put something on the field. I believe we have our first 3 are non-league games, if I looked at it correctly, and then our last one's a non-league game. I don't know how that happened, where normally we finish with our rival game against Delaware, but they're no longer in the league, so now we have Sacred Heart, I think it is, coming to our place for our senior day on the last game of the regular season. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But, I don't get too crazy with the schedule because it is what it is. Our league is 14 teams. Last year it was 16. So you're only going to play 8 league games. So you're playing this year now just over half of the guys on your schedule. So we're going to line up and play against whoever it is they're going to send us to or bring into our stadium and try to perform at a high level. But the bottom line is we got to focus in the offseason on how are we doing. You can't look ahead to who you're doing it against. You got to focus on how are we doing in our preparation, how are we doing in the strength and conditioning area in the January and February. Let's take that into spring practice. Let's get guys work on the field and get them a lot of reps and see who's going to compete and come out as starters, and then let them go home for a little bit of a break and then start all over again in the summer and preseason and see where we are ready to go when we open up with, I believe, Morgan State. Was that
yes?
It? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I know it came out today, but I haven't really looked at it that closely. But a lot of people were talking about it in the office before I walked up here. So it is what it is. Schedule's a schedule. We just got to take them one at a time and put a good team on the field and hopefully execute at a really good level.
Really looking forward to the next season, Coach. And I do want to thank you. Before, though, I let you go, talked about football questions. I had you on before, talked about cheesesteaks. So holiday season, do you have a favorite Christmas song? If so, what is it?
Okay, so I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. So I don't know if I have a favorite song, but my wife's favorite movie is White Christmas.
Okay.
So this past Sunday, and Father Peter and I were talking about that this morning in the weight room, because he comes down and trains. He comes down and works out in our weight room between 6 and 7 most mornings. So I get to bump into him on a semi-regular basis. So since our season ended, and my wife Georgia, she does everything in the fall because I'm not available to do anything in the fall with my football schedule, right? So, and she puts on great tailgates. You got to stop over sometime or the next home game.
Definitely will.
She's
Thank you.
her area is right down next to Galberry Hall. And just more food that we could have the whole stadium come in, and we still wouldn't run out of food. But anyway, so she went ahead and scheduled. I live in Phoenixville, and the Colonial Theater's out there. So we went and saw the movie White Christmas Sunday afternoon, right? And then in the same day, after the movie, went home, relaxed for maybe a half hour, got in the car, drove to Lancaster to the Dutch Apple Theater and saw the musical play of White Christmas. So it's White Christmas is now my favorite Christmas movie / play / song by Bing Crosby, I guess. So I'll say White Christmas.
That's a fantastic story. All over White Christmas. You're probably gonna have it stuck in your head at some point in time.
Oh, it's there.
Thank you so much, Coach. I know I kept you a little bit over time, but I could talk about Villanova football for days. So I appreciate you joining me, Coach.
Like I said at the front end of this thing, appreciate you inviting me for today, but also for all the following you did of us this season, and looking forward to next season as well. But we'll have an opportunity to get together in the spring, like you said, when we have our bone marrow drive on campus sometime in April for Be the Match.
Sounds good, Coach. Looking forward to it. Thank you. I always appreciate the compliments, and it's been a pleasure and an honor of mine to be able to cover the team. So thank you.
Wishing you and your family a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays as well.
Thank you. Same to you and your family, and enjoy White Christmas too. See if you see it again before Christmas. Well, thank you so much to Coach Ferrante. We'll be right back here on Villanova Sports. When we come back, we'll quickly run through the schedule that Coach Ferrante and I just talked about, and also we'll talk about the poll questions. Again, big news, David Avett returning to Villanova next season. We'll be right back after this on Villanova Sports Talk on V89.1 The Roar.